Hello and welcome to the Wire Talks. I'm Sidharth Bhatia. The Maharashtra government recently withdrew its proposal to start teaching Hindi from the lower classes in schools after pressure from opposition parties. The union government faced a similar pushback in Karnataka and Tamil Nadu for the same proposal. There are political, social, and cultural dimensions to the imposition of Hindi on the states. Many states outside the northern belt see it as a move by the BJP to impose not just the language, but also Hindutva. And the bigger question is which Hindi? My guest today, Professor Alok Rai, can provide some answers to these questions. An alumnus of the University of Oxford, where he was a Rhodes Scholar, and also of University College London. His PhD dissertation was on George Orwell. He has translated the well-known work Nirmala by Munshi Premchand, who was his grandfather, and has written a monograph, Hindi Nationalism. He has taught in various institutions, including the University of Allahabad, University of Delhi, and University of Pennsylvania. Professor Alok Rai, welcome to the Wire Talks. What do you make of this resistance by state governments against the BJP's attempts to teach Hindi in the early classes at school?
Well, at the first level, obviously, the resistance is because they feel naturally that they would be disadvantaged relative to native speakers of Hindi. But I suspect that the politics of both the attempt to impose school Hindi and the resistance to it should be understood as it were in a slightly more fine-grained fashion, in the sense that I suspect that Hindi is the least of what is intended. That is to say, it is not as if there's a burning desire that the people of Karnataka should speak Hindi, or Maharashtra for that matter, or use Hindi. I think there's something more complicated going on in the name of, in the guise of linguistic policy.
You said something more is intended, such as what?
Frankly, I suspect that similarly, as I've argued in my book, the demand for Hindi actually, even in the in North India at the beginning of the 20th century, was actually part of a much larger agenda. All right, and I suspect that this attempt to extend Hindi, school Hindi, to the non-Hindi belt is also serving another agenda. Let me explain what I mean. Really, I do think that, as with certain other policies that this government follows, it is not as if they would be entirely surprised by the resistance that they are meeting in Tamil Nadu or Karnataka or even Maharashtra. All right? They are prepared for this surprise, for this resentment, but it produces other consequences that they desire. Basically, what I'm saying is that it is the second order consequences of this policy which they are really after, which is to say, the attempt to increase the sway of Hindi in the South consolidates their support base in the Hindi belt. That the agenda is really to consolidate Hindi belt support. And the fact that you do it in Tamil Nadu and you get resistance, dramatic resistance, whatever it is, all right. Interestingly, it doesn't matter if you notice, there's a difference between the way they are reacting to Tamil Nadu or Karnataka and to Maharashtra. In Maharashtra, they have backed down. The Maharashtra government has backed down. All right. And interestingly, they have backed down because in Maharashtra, the ruling party, the BJP, actually is a serious political player. And they therefore cannot afford to throw away the support in Maharashtra in order to consolidate support in the Hindi belt. So in Maharashtra, they compromise. In Tamil Nadu, the more resistance there is, the stronger their support base, the more consolidation they achieve in the Hindi belt. That is basically the thesis I would argue.
No, so by that, I mean, if we take this thesis forward, if they almost want the resistance to be there because it helps them. But there must be some agenda in promoting it too, the idea of the language.
See, there is this sort of lust for uniformity, all right, which shows in the one nation, one election, one this, one that. So there is that. But the fact of the matter is that the particular Hindi that is sought to be introduced as school Hindi, which I distinguish from the language as it is used normally by people in most of India, excluding minor pockets of Tamil Nadu. That there is a kind of Hindi which is in use throughout the country. But the very specific school Hindi that is being sought to be imposed is something that also carries coded within it a cultural and indeed a communal agenda. It is a polarizing agenda. It is what someone else described as it's something that reenacts the logic of partition, of irreconcilable cultural difference, both in interpersonal communication and indeed within one person's use of the language, that one is, as it were, inhabited by the other unless one is consciously striving to reject it. Do you follow what I'm saying? That there is a kind of intimacy in the way one relates to language, and therefore to introduce the idea that there is a kind of alien element which your language carries unless you strive actively to remove it. You see? So the cultural agenda, the sort of the language, as it were, is encoded with this cultural agenda.
No, so I've picked up some nuances from what you're saying. And since you mentioned partition, it brings in an entirely new element, and that is they do believe in the fact that Hindi and the Hindi that will be taught will be of certain kind, with certain messaging and of certain purity in quotes, is a Hindu language, while the other Urdu, say for example, is not a Hindu language. So will these be the cultural messaging that will go on in teaching this?
Precisely, Sidharth. Precisely that, that in something as intimate as language, something that one relates to with the intimacy of language, to introduce, to smuggle that cultural agenda of irreconcilable religious communal difference. All right. So language is remarkably well suited to carrying that agenda in the most insidious form.
And this has always been from what I read, parts of your book, as much as I could, but wasn't this also a colonial agenda?
I rather suspect, Siddharth, that it was not. I think it has been it has been argued, you're absolutely right, that the kind of most people argue that this is part of the colonial agenda of divide and rule, except that in the matter of language, as a matter of fact, a lot of colonial education administrators are on record as saying that this is disastrous, that it is pedagogically both foolish, both wrong, and has negative consequences. But the fact that this Hindi was encoded with a communal agenda is sought to be obscured by planting on it a kind of colonial motivation. Do you see what I'm saying? That Fort William is in fact a false trail. The colonial intention is a false trail. The real trail leads to the people who are pushing this agenda in the face of resistance from the colonial education administrators.
Even then.
Even then.
So tell me, this is, are you saying that the slogan of Hindi, Hindu, Hindustan, which has been linked to say the Sanghi agenda, is a giveaway to say that if you learn Hindi, one nation, one language, etc., but you also identify yourselves as a Hindu, and therefore this country is for Hindus. I'm just putting it crudely.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right that this has always been there from the early beginnings. And mind you, I mean, this as I argue in my book, all right, this Hindu agenda is also very specifically, and we can see it from the original context in which the controversy started. It is also actually a caste agenda. It is an upper caste agenda which is being sought to be pushed. But obviously, this caste, again, by calling it Hindu, in some sense, attention is being diverted from the covert class agenda. Caste agenda, sorry, forgive me.
And the caste agenda is that the Brahmins know what's good for you. Again,
Yeah.
put it simply.
Yeah. Absolutely. That is exactly right. That they do, and they are the preservers of what is actually authentic in your cultural heritage. That everything else is merely pollution of one kind and another.
Do you think that the opposition parties in states like Tamil Nadu have grasped that?
I think at some subconscious level they might well have. They might well be aware that Hindi, that language policy is basically the thin end of a wedge, and the wedge is obviously a wedge, right? It pushes a bigger agenda. But I think, but again, Sidharth, let me come back. My main point is that the real agenda is not the non-Hindi state. The real agenda is consolidate the Hindi belt vote. That this is our party. These are people who are pushing our interests even against the political resistance of others, of other states. You know?
Alok, but when you say that, it means, put it again in stark political terms, it means that the governments of Tamil Nadu and say Karnataka are walking into the BJP trap.
I hadn't thought of it that way, but I think you're right. Either way, basically for them it is lose-lose. Either they consent, all right, in which case they obviously disadvantage themselves relative to native speakers of Hindi, or they disadvantage themselves, all right, because they consolidate the political opposition. The kind of the demographic balance in any case favors the North. And then if this policy is accepted by them, so either way, either they consolidate the BJP support in the Hindi belt, or they consent to the domination, the linguistic domination of the native speakers of the Hindi belt. So either way, they lose. So from the purely political point of view, it is a brilliant policy initiative.
But surely at some level, playing devil's advocate, at some level, the BJP may want to spread Hindi as much as possible, because going strictly by what you've been saying, because it promises to bring them electoral support even in the southern states in the future.
I don't see the logic of that, frankly, Siddharth. I mean, I don't see how introducing Hindi in schools in Karnataka or Tamil Nadu will bring them political support in the future. In whose support are they garnering with that?
The support of a new a cohort of people from Karnataka or Tamil Nadu who will grow up with these ideas in their head: a Sarkari Hindu, a pure Hindi, Sarkari Hindi, and they will grow up and they will say yes. And those ideas will obviously, as you said in the beginning, it's a coded messaging in the teaching, in the pedagogy. Those ideas will get into their head and they will probably grow up more leaning towards that agenda than the native one. Just a thought.
Yeah, no. I think there might be there might be something in it. Frankly, I mean, I don't see how. I don't really see now the way in which this politics will play out in, say, Tamil Nadu. All right, because obviously, since the identity of the cultural identity of Tamil Nadu is constructed so much around the idea of Tamil, whether the cultural logic of Hindi as being in some sense primary, indigenous, will play out there. I don't know. Frankly, I cannot. I mean, I concede your point that there is a possibility that a new constituency may emerge in the fullness of time. All right, which is as it were encoded with the cultural agenda of school Hindi. It's possible, but I don't, I hadn't actually thought of it in those terms at all. I was really much more interested in what it is doing in the immediate, in the present, all right, in the present time, which is of consolidating their identity as a Hindi belt party. That is what they really are.
Where there are already this entire exercise of more seats and delimitation, etc., is already being played out separately, which the southern parties realize, and that it's going to serve the anyone who dominates the north a lot more than somebody who relies on the southern seats, which will go down. So already there is something else going on in parallel.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. There's something else. This seems to sort of fit in with that. Now, I'm just curious about why, because obviously the people at the center who have devised this policy and are returning to it recurrently, all right, these are very, excuse me, these are very clever people. So the first order, second order, third order consequences of their policy must all have been taken into account. What I'm suggesting is that there are, so to speak, that the immediate effect of that policy might not be all that is intended.
Okay, now the one question that one wants to ask is, yes, there are all these objectives going on while promoting this or pushing this policy. Which Hindi will be taught? Question one. Question 1A, will it be a Sarkari Hindi? You take a flight, you listen to the air hostess speak, and you are completely, utterly mystified by what she is saying because it is in such boring Sarkari Hindi. Or B, the day-to-day Hindustani, which is easy to grasp, which is not necessarily colloquial, but linguistically very easy to understand. So you promote those kind of chapters or stories, which are, and if you want to be slightly imaginative, you might also show some interesting audiovisual aids, because in Hindi movies, for example, that kind of Hindi is used. Will it be that? I suspect it will be the first, But what do you think?
I think, the as it were, the everyday Hindi of communication, all right, that people have used today and have used for centuries, really. I mean, the Hindi, the everyday Hindi that we call Hindustani or whatever, all right, this is something that has evolved over time through the natural communication needs of people who come in contact with each other. And so it is not, I mean, it's not some, I mean, people look at the effect of Bombay cinema, for instance, and the fact that films have actually brought this language into people's homes, this ordinary everyday language into people's homes. But it has been happening for a much longer time. Long before cinema was doing it, it was being done by people, by travelers, workers, pilgrims, so on and so forth. The school Hindi is a different project altogether, and I think it is important. And I think if you read look at my book, you will discover I make a very sharp distinction between this ordinary everyday Hindi and what you're calling Sarkari Hindi, and I think of as Sarkari Hindi or schooly Hindi. This is, I put it within quotation marks, this is a different thing altogether. This is a different cultural project and should be understood as a cultural project. Right? It's not merely language. It is encoded with ideas of purity, indigenism, foreignness. All of those things come encoded in the language.
And those are the more sinister parts of this entire plan.
Yeah, indeed, that is the plan. Otherwise, there's no need for language policy. Otherwise, Hindi, in the way in which it has evolved over the centuries, is evolving anyway. It is the fact of the matter. Look, Sir Syed traveling in India, all right, in the latter half of the 19th century, said that everywhere he went, he found people who understood him. He could communicate with them. You and I can do it. That barring, as I said, pockets of rural Tamil Nadu, unless one runs into ideological resistance, everyday work can be carried on in Hindi. All right? Obviously, sophisticated things cannot be done. But everyday stuff can go on and will happen. The reason why there is a linguistic policy at all must be because it is serving other ends. Otherwise, everyday Hindi is there, it is thriving, it is growing, and needs no help from the government.
It's interesting that the first resistance came from Tamil Nadu, because in the 1960s there were student riots against the imposition of Hindi, and that was certainly Sarkari Hindi, and that gave us ultimately the education policy, which has served us well. So you have a more than a point when you say that if things were going along well at the street level as well as the classroom level, why disturb it? And the reason for disturbing is obviously something far beyond simply suggesting that kids learn another language.
Yeah. Why have a policy at all? Once again, one should approach it like a puzzle. Why bother? All right. And if you're bothering, then what happens? How does it play out? All right. And I'm suggesting not only that there is resistance resistance in Tamil Nadu, resistance in Maharashtra, where they back down. All right. They try and slip it in, then realize that there is a political cost and back down. All right. So, if one tries to distinguish between the reactions in Tamil Nadu and Maharashtra, you see that there is kind of more of a political cost involved for them in Maharashtra than in Tamil Nadu. So, Maharashtra, they will back down, not in Tamil Nadu. In Tamil Nadu, they will let the resistance happen simply because it will do good things at the second order level, which is to say back in the Hindi belt. That these difficult anti-national, if you remember the whole sort of concern with Tamil Nadu, for Tamil Nadu, as the name would suggest, there was a suggestion at one point of Tamil Nadu being something else, something different, something separate. All right. So that at that point, legislation was brought in of all kinds. All right. So I'm sorry, I'm a bit sort of losing myself there, but yeah. So Tamil Nadu is a different kind of story, really.
In Maharashtra, it is quite obvious. There are municipal elections coming up. The BJP wants to dominate. The other two parties, more than the Shiv Sena, the Congress and the NCP all combined, even if they fight separately, are a far formidable force and can possibly cause an upset because the Shiv Sena has been running the municipal corporation for 30 years. I'm sorry going into all these details, but the BJP wants to take control, which is the richest municipality in the country, and it cannot afford to give a hand over something, a stick to beat them with. So they capitulated swiftly. In Tamil Nadu, there is no such compulsion. Tamil Nadu, as you have really, it's a very, very intriguing point. They are going to go back to their constituents in the northern belt and say, see, we tried, but these people refuse to be part of the mainstream. Except, isn't it correct to say that in the northern states, there is no such thing as one Hindi being spoken, and certainly not the pure Sarkari Hindi. So how do you reconcile that?
Oh, no. Hang on. The diversity, the plurality of Hindis is something that is incontestable. Of course, it is the case. It is the homogenizing impulse behind school Hindi, which is the policy issue. See, otherwise there is no need at all. I mean, the question I ask myself, Sidharth, is why do you have a linguistic policy? All right, languages don't grow through policy. Languages evolve over time, and linguistic policy rarely serves any direct linguistic ends. It might well serve other ends.
How do the people in, say, of course, in UP itself, as they say, every 100 miles, 200 miles you go, the dialect changes. Sometimes the language itself changes. In Madhya Pradesh, in Bihar, in Jharkhand, how will they view? Don't they also view this imposition of one type of Hindi on them, not imposition necessarily through government policy, but generally by social factors? Don't they view it as a threat? So many languages have almost vanished. Don't they view it as a threat?
Let me, give you my sense of what you asked, which is to say that what about the diversity of Hindis in the Hindi belt itself, and how is it that the speakers of various so-called Hindi dialects, which interestingly enough have actually longer histories than school Hindi? The fact of the matter is that Braj or Bhojpuri or Awadhi all have longer histories, richer literary heritages than school Hindi, so to speak. All right. I think school Hindi is a special case, and I think the speakers of, say, Awadhi or Bhojpuri or Braj, for that matter, they use or don't use their Hindi. But as far as school Hindi is concerned, no one uses it. That there's practically no writing that is happening in that. If you think of writers and so on, they don't use that Hindi because it's lifeless. All right. That the attempt to make a pure Hindi which is divested of cultural influences is a futile quest, and it inhibits one's, the ability to do anything at all with language rests on drawing upon all resources, rather than wondering whether what is emerging from me, from my mouth, is truly indigenous, native, authentic, and so on. So this school Hindi is, as it were, a sterile, stillborn project, except in terms of what it achieves, not at a linguistic level, but at a political level.
But as far as the student is concerned, even in parts of North India, leave alone the rest of the country, even in parts of North India, uh, groans about the fact that he or she has to sit through classes for a year and pass and then never use it again. And even I have known of even people who are very familiar with Hindi in their lives, Hindi speaking people who find it very, very difficult to get even reasonable pass grades. So, therefore, this battle has been going on even in other parts of India, forget Tamil Nadu, who to teach a kind of Hindi. And I don't know whether this the BJP has thought this through completely, whether it has paid them, this particular policy has paid them any dividends elsewhere. Other things may have, but this may be a pie in the sky. This is what I wanted to say.
You mean the well, see, there is the politics of Hindi in the Hindi belt, all right, which is a little of what you implying when you say the diversity of people's Hindis as opposed to a one homogeneous monolithic school Hindi. All right. So there is the politics of the Hindi belt itself, which is very simply a caste politics. All right, it's a kind of upper caste politics against the diversity of people's Hindis, which obviously are mixed, have folk elements and this and that and the other. The other is the politics of Hindi, school Hindi, being extended outside the Hindi belt, where everyday Hindustani in various forms is available anyway. It has been made available over the centuries by mendicants, pilgrims, workers, all kinds of things, and by cinema in our own time. That Hindi is already there. What work is school Hindi doing in the non-Hindi belt? Part of what I'm saying is what school Hindi is doing, and the imposition of school Hindi is doing within the Hindi belt, and what it is doing outside the Hindi belt. Outside the Hindi belt, it obviously provokes resistance, which is good, which consolidates Hindi belt support. All right, and essentially, or maybe I've missed something in what you've asked me.
No, my question is: has this policy so far? I know you've just said these two things have different objectives in the south, in the north, but in the north, has forcing school Hindi on students paid help them get any kind of political dividend. In fact, it may also cause some resentment, maybe of a simple kind that students don't like it, or of something deeper that it is subsuming our cultures. So I don't know whether there may be a kind of very critical difference between the South and the North in the objectives, but I think it may be the word I've used in many contexts as far as these friends, gentlemen are concerned, clever by half.
Well, yes, except that in the north, I think it not only has paid dividends, it continues to pay dividends in that it makes the cultural agenda. This whole business about purity and pollution, it brings it to the classroom in the everyday experience of the way people use language. All right, and so in that sense, it makes that cultural agenda always present. And that is the dividend they get is not linguistic, because the other languages in any case carry on doing their work. All right. Bhojpuri exists in its own fashion, in its own sometimes very perverse fashion, but it exists. Awadhi exists. I mean, I've just been traveling through Awadh, and people use Awadhi constantly. There's no problem with that. They do all the work they need to do, and Tulsidas also continues to exist. So there's no problem with that. School Hindi is doing something else. School Hindi is importing within the everyday classroom the cultural agenda of purity, and by implication, pollution. That is what they're doing. Sorry, I thumped the table there. Forgive me.
There was a question in the beginning, and you said that that's actually overblown. But once and for all, I want to. I and no doubt many readers want to know this: is Hindi a creation during the Raj? Was Hindi created during the Raj?
Emerges during the period before 1947. All right. Is it a product of the Raj? And is it a product of Raj policy? I would say no. All right. Except in a very much more complicated fashion, where you talk about censuses, electoral constituencies, and kind of other extra linguistic factors. Yes, obviously. The creation of electoral constituencies, numerically countable communities, all of that brings its own politics, and language plays into that. But is it colonial educational policy to divide the languages? No.
Okay, so remember that the first linguistic policy was introduced during the Congress time. So there were worthies in the Congress too who wanted to push the case and cause of Sarkari Hindi.
Absolutely, entirely agree with you. Of course there was. I mean, indeed, one of the big drivers who as it were, exiled Urdu from UP, all right, which is the land of its birth, all right, exiled Urdu from UP was Sampurnanand, who was the Congress chief minister of UP. So, yeah. Party, no consideration. Yeah. This kind of thinking is very much Hindi belt, upper caste thinking. It's very simple.
Yeah. So this is a far more vexed and complex question that then we read in the newspapers. I'm so glad that we got an opportunity to talk to you. Thank you, Professor Alok Rai, with your understanding and your credentials. You were indeed very helpful in telling us and telling our readers, listeners, what lies behind a seemingly simple education policy that the BJP is promoting. So thank you very much for it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We'll be back. That was Professor Alok Rai, who has taught in several universities and writes equally dexterously in Hindi as well as in English. We'll be back next week with another guest. Till then, from me, Sidharth Bhatia, and the rest of the team in Wire Talks, goodbye.